This is chapter 2 of my book 1970s America, an Indian Student's Journey. The chapter is titled The Preparation. After getting the news of scholarship, a lot of work still needed to be done to get the passport, ticket, foreign exchange, visa, etc. Getting a passport in 1974 was quite a big affair and took an inordinately long time since a detailed police inquiry had to be conducted. I applied to the Lucknow passport office since we lived in Lucknow for it, and with the help of my father's political connections, got the passport in quite a short time. My case was also helped by the fact that I was a Government of India National Scholar, which was quite a prestigious scholarship in those times. Getting foreign exchange was another matter. In those times, with the precarious foreign exchange situation in India, it was difficult to get it. Besides, there were hardly any travel agents, and thus I decided to do everything myself. It was quite a lot of work, but somehow I enjoyed it because it allowed me to interact with the Government of India's bureaucracy, and at that age, one is not cynical, and hence I took everything in stride as it came. The Reserve Bank of India's regional office was in Kanpur, so the foreign exchange of 250 US dollars that the Government of India had given me was to be purchased from Kanpur. I filled out all the forms and deposited the necessary money to the bank. I thought that this paperwork should be enough to get the foreign exchange since the official Government of India letter was also enclosed. However, after an eternity and explaining many times why I needed the exchange, I was given the traveler's checks in the evening and just before the bank closing time. I had never felt so much fear in my life as I felt after getting the checks and they were put in the innermost pocket of the undergarment. For my MTech, I used to be paid rupees 400 per month scholarship from IIT Kanpur. With this scholarship, I thought I lived like a king. I had two pairs of shirts and pants which were washed every Sunday, and I used to see a movie in Kanpur once a month or maybe have a dinner once a month. Thus, in 2 years of my MTech, I saved substantial amounts so that I could pay for all the formalities of going to US like getting foreign exchange, etc. In 1974, a dollar US dollar was worth rupees 8 and hence $250 did not amount to too many rupees. In fact, after passing BTech, I never took any money from my parents. To get all the paperwork done for US, I had to go many times to Shastri Bhavan, New Delhi, which was a hub of the education department from where I had got the scholarship. I used this opportunity to really walk all over New Delhi. Delhi in 1974 was a beautiful city with hardly any traffic, broad footpaths and sidewalks, and in September October, a very pleasant weather to walk. The fact that I was going to US filled me with tremendous emotions and happy feelings of how I was going to use my US education for the betterment of India. I cannot explain why I got those emotions. I still remember many of my friends remarking at that time that I talked of nothing else but India and its future. At the age of 24, the mind is at its peak, and if it gets a boost by some positive event like going to US, then it knows no bounds. I felt at that time that I could do anything in the world and nothing was impossible. This joyous and exuberant state must have been noticed by others also because in any government office work, etc., I seem to charm a lot of office babus with great effect. Thus, for my air ticket, I was given a letter by Shastri Bhavan for Air India. By this time, I had become good friends with Mr. Sharma, the same Babu in Shastri Bhavan who had said that I will not get my travelling allowance or TATA. Since I was a part of the system now, hence Mr. Sharma, being a good Government of India clerk, would provide all the help. He was a point man who gave all the different letters for passport, tickets, foreign exchange, etc. Air India in those times, and this is 1970s, was one of the world's best airlines. It is really sad to see what it has become today. Their main office in Delhi used to be in the Connaught Place and was huge and very crowded. Armed with the letter from the Education Ministry, I went to meet the manager of Air India to get my ticket. I chatted with him quite a lot, telling him about my desire and aspirations of using solar energy for the betterment of India. And when, on the spur of the moment, he said that he will give me a ticket for a helicopter ride from JFK Airport to LaGuardia Airport. In those times, all the international flights used to land at JFK Airport in New York, while the US domestic flights used to originate from LaGuardia Airport, which is about 10 miles from JFK. Normally, there were shuttle buses between the two airports. At that time, I had no idea what the manager was talking about, but later on found out that the helicopter ticket is normally given to first class passengers. Since this was my first flight anywhere, so I had no idea what was in store for me, but was overjoyed to learn that besides the jumbo jet, I will also be traveling by a helicopter. During my visits to Shastri Bhavan, Mr. Sharma, the clerk, used to be very surprised by my decision to go to the University of Florida. He said many times that most of the national scholars go to top schools like MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, etc. So why are you going to University of Florida? I have never heard of this university, he used to ask. I used to explain to him that I was going to work under a world famous professor and the university name did not matter very much for a PhD. He somehow was not convinced with this answer and said that I was making a mistake. By the time I got my air ticket, it was already middle of November and the next item on agenda was to get the US visa. Also, I was receiving regular mails from the University of Florida housing office telling me to please postpone coming in fall of 1974 since there was no campus housing available. In any case, I was going in the winter quarter starting from January 1975 since all the formalities of the Government of India scholarship could not be finalized for fall quarter. So I wrote to the housing office at UF that please book a room for me for winter quarter. This letter was extremely helpful later on. My father, being a well known political figure in Uttar Pradesh, UP politics, was frequently visited by high ranking US Embassy officials. He was very close to Shri H.N. Bahuguna, who was a popular Chief Minister of UP and a strong candidate for future Prime Ministership of India. The US Embassy staff recognized this and hence whenever they visited Lucknow, they would meet my father. Besides, he was a regular columnist in Hindustan, an influential Hindi daily paper published from Delhi by Hindustan Times Group. My father's editorial articles on political matters of UP regularly appeared in this paper and molded the opinion of important people in New Delhi. This was much before the crass commercial journalism that the present papers have come down to, so that the editorial columns of newspapers do not shape the opinions anymore. This is what brought Mr. Peter Thompson, the first secretary in US Embassy to Lucknow, to see my father and they became good friends. So when the time came for me to get a US visa, my father phoned up Mr. Thompson in Delhi, who immediately agreed to help me to get the visa work done. On the appointed day, I went to the US Embassy and straight to Mr. Peter Thompson's office. In those times, it was quite easy to go to the US Embassy in Chanakyapuri, New Delhi. Nowadays, it is a fortress, and I am told that it is very difficult to go inside it. Peter had called me a little earlier since he wanted to talk to me, and at the same time, the appointment was kept somewhat flexible. I told Peter about my aspirations of learning solar energy, and we discussed lots of things. Since Kennedy was one of my heroes in those days, so I discussed the Kennedy clan. Peter was quite surprised by my readings other than engineering since he thought that IITians were nerds. In any case, I remember discussing with him the issue of Nixon pardon, and he was very emphatic that President Ford made a mistake in pardoning Nixon. I was an impassionate observer, felt that some of the Americans were not forgiving and were very passionate about taking revenge. However, I could see their point of view since the younger generation in those times was extremely polarized by Vietnam War, which they thought was a part of Nixon legacy. Peter at the appointed time took me to the Consul General's CG office I was asked to wait for a few minutes outside, and I found that the gentleman sitting next to me, waiting his turn, was the Attorney General of India. Though he had been waiting much before my arrival, but because of Peter, I was immediately called into the office of CG. The CG looked at my application, the I-20 of the UF, and also the amount that I would be getting from National Scholarship. If I remember correctly, there was a shortfall of about $1,500 to $2,000 per year between national scholarship that the government of India was giving me and the UF demand in their I-20. So he asked me how I was going to make up the difference. I replied arrogantly that the UF figures are for American students who live an affluent lifestyle, go to discos and party all the time, whereas an Indian student with simple living will not require too much money for staying. The CG glared at me angrily, and I got the feeling that he would have thrown me out of his office, but the situation was saved in the nick of time by Peter Thompson's intervention, who suggested that since all the fees are being taken care of by the government scholarship, the living allowance should be sufficient to survive. After coming out of the office, Peter told me that I should not have said what I did, so the visa was really given because of Peter Thompson. My statement to CG was not really off the mark, since I found later on that the UF numbers were based on student eating out in UF cafeteria, which was much more costly than the cooking at home. Thus, I was easily able to save some amount every month, even from my meager $250 monthly stipend, which was eventually raised to $400 per month within 1/4 of my reaching Gainesville. In any case, getting a US visa was very difficult in those times, and I wonder whether without the help of Peter Thompson, I could have gotten it. I am sure the consular staff would have insisted that the difference be made by my family's finances, and with the precarious financial situation of my family, it would have been very difficult to do so. As they say, when things have to happen, ways are shown by the forces to be. Peter Thompson was a very dynamic and bold man, but was also slightly arrogant. His arrogance naturally came from the power of US government. After getting the visa, we both went to the office of Shri Ratanlal Joshi, the editor of Delhi Hindustan. Shri Joshi was at one time a very close confidant of Mrs. Indira Gandhi and an influential figure in the New Delhi political scene. We were both invited by Shri Joshi for lunch at his house. Ratanlal Joshi and my father were in jail together during the 1942 freedom movement and were very close friends. So anytime I came to Delhi, I would go and meet Joshiji. He was an intellectual and a very soft-spoken person, and we enjoyed talking on all sorts of issues concerning energy and Indian affairs. When I told him about my getting the US visa and how Peter Thompson was helping me in getting it, he invited both of us for lunch. We reached Joshiji's office around 1:30 p.m. On entering, we found that Mr. Joshi was on the phone and he kept on talking for the next half an hour. Obviously, Peter Thompson got really rattled, and after Joshiji finished talking, he told him that he has information that Mr. Joshi will soon be removed from the editorship of Hindustan. Mr. Joshi became extremely angry, livid, and red in face, and started telling Peter Thompson in raised voice that CIA agents can do anything. Peter, who obviously knew what was coming, could not tolerate the remarks and left without lunch. I pleaded him with to stay on, but he refused to budge. I found out later that Peter was right, and Shri Joshiji was eased out from his editorship in next couple of months. The main reason was that Joshiji was perceived by Mrs. Indira Gandhi to be a close to Shri H.N. Bahuguna, her arch enemy, and a person considered to have engineered the infamous Allahabad High Court decision against her in 1975, which ultimately led to imposition of emergency in India. How Peter and US Embassy knew about it at that time is a mystery to me. I left India for US on 29th December 1974. It was my first flight anywhere, and hence the excitement was too much. Not only my whole family, but friends and well-wishers came to see me off. I think about 10 to 12 people came to the airport to bid me farewell. In those times, it was a big affair to see off people at the airport, especially when one was going to the United States. At the security point in those days, they used to check the baggage physically since the X-ray checking had not been developed. Since I was taking a couple of pair of shoes, the rude security person remarked that all Indian students going to US carry only shoes. He was quite an obnoxious and rude person and broke a pakad or a pot holder the British couple had bought to take back home. They had bought it in Chandni Chowk in New Delhi. It was a very useful and novel item for them. The security man did not even have the courtesy of saying sorry. Going through the security and customs at the airports in India in those times was quite a harrowing experience. By contrast, it is a very smooth ride nowadays. However, going through the US immigration and security nowadays is quite an ordeal and sometimes a nightmare. The tables have been turned. The British woman was distraught and almost on the verge of crying. After we sat on the bus, which took us to the aircraft, I tried to console her by telling her that not all Indians are as crude and impolite as this security person was. I apologized to her on his behalf. I was a proud Indian and felt that the foreigners should always leave with a good impression about India. When the Air India flight took off at midnight, I cried. It was a strange experience for me, since I always considered myself as a strong person, but a tremendous love for India, the motherland, erupted within me. I vowed that I was going to US to learn technologies so that I could come back to use them for India's benefit. I am still amazed even today about how that feeling came, but it did come with a tremendous force. There was sadness in leaving my family behind, but this overwhelming emotion for India was amazing. I felt there were pangs similar to those felt by a newly married girl during Bidai.